myself, and this is X-ray there.
So for those of you that don't know, I'm Robbie. I've been a PT here at Les Mills Howick for the past 10 years. When I first started training, all of my training was around bodybuilding, and then that's how I trained my clients. And then I started, as I was going on, started to notice aches and pains around my body, specifically back pain, which led me to one day as I was flying to Los Angeles to go and train at Gold's Gym down there. I got off the plane after a 13-hour flight, and I basically couldn't walk. I had sciatica down both legs. My back was basically screaming. So I went straight to the accommodation and tried to do all the things that we are basically told to do when we experience pain or we want to increase mobility. I'll do foam rolling, stretching, even go see physios and all that. So I eventually got recommended to go see a chiropractor down in Santa Monica. And as I was there, the first thing they did was do my x-ray. And that started to actually give me a bit of an insight into what was going on inside my body and why I was experiencing all this pain. It wasn't just back pain. It would lead up to my neck and shoulders. And what they pointed out to me was slight scoliosis and compression on the right side of my spine, and a pelvis that is hiked up on the right side and orientated to the right side as well. So then that got me really thinking and wanting to find out, why has this happened? Why do humans move the way that they do, and how do they move the way that they do? That led me into upskilling over years and years, more trial and error, eventually finding PRI, the Postural Restoration Institute, where I learned about how the human body, specifically the torso, is an air pressure system, along with a neurological system that our environment starts to affect how we move and the amount of range of motion that we have throughout our joints because of our sensory system. So years of going through courses of that, and again, trial and error, trying things on myself and clients, I'm now at a point where I'm able to train better than I've ever been able to before. Back pain is something I just don't even think about. It's not a concern of mine. And I'm able to pass that on to clients as well and educate them and try to empower them to be able to manage themselves with the pains that they experience. That can come and go, because that's what happens throughout our life. It's never linear. Pain can come and go depending on basically what state we're in at that time. So if you came to the first workshop, I spoke about how the human body is an air pressure system and how our breathing mechanics will affect our center of mass, and how we are always working against gravity when we're upright specifically, and how we work with gravity will depend on what our posture's like and how we move. That will then have an effect on how our breathing mechanics are and where air starts to go throughout the body. So as I spoke about again in the first workshop, if we've got air that is always coming forward, that's going to start to affect the way that our pelvis and our rib cage is positioned. And then that's going to start to affect the way that our spine is positioned. So if we're just standing and we have air coming forward all the time, our rib cage will tend to be more flared. Our pelvis will tend to be more tilted forward in an anterior position, and then all of our weight starts to come forward. So when we try to walk around like that, it's almost like we constantly have the handbrake on. We're trying not to fall over, because from our brain's perspective, we don't want to go down there, because this is the most precious cargo on our human body. So the body will lock everything up, get into this overly extended position, and will start to inhibit rotation throughout the body, specifically our spine. And then over time of that will just cause more and more compression throughout our spine, as our pelvis isn't moving, it's not rotating how it should, and our rib cage isn't moving, it's not compressing and expanding how it should. So one way that we can really highlight how we deal with gravity is a squat. So when we squat, especially if we've got a bar on our back, a lot of the times that's going to push us forward. So if we're already in this forward position because we're losing the battle against gravity, that's going to push us forward more. We start to run out of space when we come down into a squat, and that's going to put compression on our spine, further putting us into this extension pattern and losing the space and rotation that we need. So that's something that we can try now if we all want to stand up. So we'll just go through a few squats. I'll talk you through that just before we do it. Just have your feet centered under your hips.
What we're going to do first is actually you want to take the shoes off.
Yeah.
Don't want to take the shoes off.
So that way we're going to be able to feel, where do we feel pressure from the ground up? So all we're trying to do there is just one thing that can start to manipulate how we deal with gravity, because the big one is airflow. Airflow will start to dictate how our posture is. It's not necessarily just muscles being tense, it's what's happening internally, which will start to be presented on the outside. So this is a question that you just touched on before about what you do on one side. The human body is not symmetrical, but yet we try to force symmetry by a lot of the main exercises that we do, like squats, pressing and deadlifting, or with both feet and a fixed bar, and then planks to try to help with our back pain. Our asymmetries come from our inside, from where our organs are placed. So we are slightly heavier on our right side because of more organ placement. We have liver on this side, but probably more importantly, we have a diaphragm on this right side that is roughly twice the size of our left diaphragm. So for some people, that might not mean too much, but for a lot of people, that right diaphragm can start to get too much air when we do about 20 to 22,000 breaths per day. You think about that's all just 20 to 22,000 repetitions that maybe that one diaphragm is just getting. When that happens, that starts to create dysfunction in our breathing mechanics, and that can then start to be presented on the outside in the way our posture is and the way that our bones start to hold positions. So from the ground up, what you would usually see with this right side dominance is a right foot that is a little bit higher in the arch, a little bit stiffer, and a left foot that is a little bit more collapsed. Then when you go further up the chain to your pelvis, you have a pelvis that is slightly more orientated to the right side. So you're sitting back into this right hip. And then the left hip, which can be slightly more tilted to the left side, which will further orientate us to that right side. Then further up, our rib cage will start to be slightly compressed on this right side and flared on this left side. Mainly because of this right diaphragm that is getting so much air, which from a brain's perspective will start grounding us through this right side. Then air will start going up into the opposite lung. So that'll be our left lung getting all of this air. Then our right lung just not really knowing how to expand very well, causing these ribs to start to collapse. And we usually start seeing a shoulder on this right side that's a little bit lower and maybe rounded forward, compressed, and we get these tight pecs through here. Then we go up even more, and we have a cervical spine or our neck that struggles to turn to the left, because now we've got these SCM muscles, these neck muscles, that are trying to do the job, which partly their job is to help draw air in and expand the rib cage. But if they're doing 100% of the job, and this right lung isn't expanding, then it's going to start to lock down. It's trying to lift these ribs up, and it will inhibit this movement. So if we have that and we're walking around, we still have to walk, so the body will start to find compensation patterns to keep us going. So if we're walking around like this, eventually we're going to get more compensation patterns, create torsions throughout our spine and compression throughout our spine. And then repetition, 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 that is going to start to create pain, or that might be the signal and the byproduct of it. So if we're coming into the gym and we're just doing, the majority of our work is bilateral exercises, both things at the same time, we're just going to really create a strong stimulus and try to encourage symmetry on an asymmetrical body, which will then eventually out-train our gait movement. The body's two things that the body must do is breathe, or we die, and move forward, walk. If we can't do that, it will try to do that in whatever way, even if that causes pain for us. All right, desk workers, or just people that find that they sit for the majority of the time. When we are sitting, usually, especially when we're younger, we're told by our parents, told by our teachers, that we need to sit up straight, keep your shoulders back, and focus. That's not exactly good. It's not necessarily bad. But what that does is it really enforces a sympathetic response. When we're here, and you look at athletes and they're here and they're alert, when our spine is in this extended pattern, we're alert. And that can drain our energy very, very, very quickly. And when we think about it, you might have experienced this, is all the years of trying to sit up straight, do you still have pain? Do you still have back pain? But that doesn't mean that slouching is the answer, because both ways we will struggle to create intra-abdominal pressure, and we'll struggle to expand our ribs, expand our torso, which helps create space throughout our vertebrae. So if we're seated and we're trying to sit up straight, usually what's going to happen is our pelvis will start to dump forward and our ribs will start to pop up. And we're focusing on a screen. We're in this closed off office. And when we're in this position, we can't create intra-abdominal pressure because air is most likely going forward. And we're compressing our spine even more and more. But then the same thing happens when we start to slouch and we get into this position. Yes, the pelvis may be tucked back and the ribs may be down, but now our front of our ribs, our anterior chest wall, is closed off. Our neck goes forward and then our head goes along for the ride. When we do that, our neck wants to do all the breathing, or tries to do all the breathing and draw air in for us. When that happens, we also cannot create intra-abdominal pressure. In an ideal world, we should be able to get up every 20 minutes or so, go for a little walk, be in nice big open spaces, because our brain loves big open spaces. But in today's work environment, stressful work environment, that's just not realistic. So there are things that you can do at your desk, which we give our clients, where you can do right there, where you can still continue working, really, or at least your boss looks like you're still working. So we can do that now seated like this. Obviously, you don't have a desk in front of you, but you can use your thighs in place of that. So you can bring your feet out in front of you so you can feel your feet flat on the floor, the toes and heels on the floor, and your elbows rested on your thighs. They'll be down in here. That's it. So just like what you've done with the hook line bridge when you're laying on the floor, we want to exhale fully and see if you can feel your ribs come back. You will feel your spine flex a little bit. That's okay. And when you're there, try to maintain that position, breathing in we're trying to get air into the back of the rib cage. So if you want to go through that, exhaling fully throughout your mouth, feel a little bit of pressure of your elbows into your thighs, breathing in softly through your nose, trying to see if we can feel air coming to the back of the rib cage. Yeah. It may feel really restricted back there when air's trying to get there, because if that tissue has been so tense and short, tight for a long time, it's not used to lengthening and expanding. We have something in the back of the ribs which is called the posterior mediastinum, and that's what expands, what should expand with air, should be able to fill up with air. So that's something that you can do if you're sitting for a long period and you notice. Maybe what I get my clients to do is try to be conscious of every 20 minutes or so of just getting some air back there. What they tend to find is it actually relaxes them a bit more, and then they can be a little bit more productive because the system starts to wind down a little bit, and then they continue working, they can be more creative, and they're not worried about their back stiffening up or that pain can start to go. So pain can be obviously quite a frightening thing, especially when we don't know what's going on and we don't really understand it. Pain is just a signal from the brain to an area that something's going on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that where you're feeling that pain, it doesn't mean necessarily that that is the problem or the problem area. It could be a surrounding joint. But what it's generally telling us is that a joint somewhere has lost space, it's lost movement, it's lost its function, it's lost some type of rotation. Most people will go, when they feel and experience pain, the first thing they want to do is stop, and they want to rest and think that that will be something that will help with recovery. Partly, but what we really need to do is restore that space and restore that function so that the brain can then calm down. Everything starts getting okay. We move away from this sympathetic state that we get into. We shift into a parasympathetic state. So that's where, again, which we've been talking about all throughout this workshop and the previous workshops, is can we calm our state down? Can we use air, our breathing mechanics, to restore space? And then can we do some type of exercise or drill that will encourage the rotation and function of how that joint is supposed to move? Rather than staying away from the gym, is when I've had clients who, because again, pain comes and goes, even with clients that I've seen for a while because of whatever their lifestyle is or what stresses that they have from work, family, etc. That can come and go, but it's about management. I don't necessarily believe in anything like pain-free or bulletproofing joints. It's all about self-management because life is all over the place. So when clients do experience these pains and they're a little bit hesitant and maybe thinking, I shouldn't come to the session, I shouldn't come to the gym, if I can communicate to them about why they should and get them in there, convince them basically, come in, we tend to go through a lot of this, we see what's going on, and they end up leaving feeling a lot better, and I'll give them a tool that they can do when they get home and throughout the few days to just encourage that movement and space to stay there. So that's where, this is a little bit of an advert for all of us PTs, but that's where a personal trainer is really good, especially one that knows about the human body and has built a rapport with you and knows you. That's where they come in and they can start to, at least anything, shift things on the fly during a session. Because what's a program online on YouTube is not going to tell you is what's happening within your body itself. Some of those programs online aren't necessarily bad, but maybe you just don't move in that way, or you don't have that space at that time to be able to perform that amount of reps with that amount of intensity and the specific exercises themselves. This one here, you are inflamed, and our recovery. This is something that I truly believe that, yes, we can do everything that we've spoken about today, but if you're neglecting recovery or sleep, and we're doing things or consuming things that cause us to have inflammation throughout the body, a lot of those things will have an effect, but I find that they won't stick. Because if we're under recovered, then it comes back to our state, and our system is under fatigue constantly. So if we're not doing things around building a good sleep habits and increasing not necessarily the quantity of our sleep, but the quality of our sleep. And I can relate to this today, because if anyone follows the Warriors, I do. And I stayed up last night, watched the Warriors, and they disappointed me. I had a couple of beers. Again, yeah. It takes me some time to wind down before I go to bed, because I get a bit of adrenaline watching them. They disappointed me, and I think it was about maybe 1 a.m. before I actually was like, okay, I can go to sleep now. And then I wake up this morning and I go, my neck's a little bit stiff, because for me, that's one of the first things to go, is this neck, because of years of having asthma and breathing dysfunction. This SEM for me loves to take over. And when that happens, I get very compressed through this side. So when I woke up this morning, I go, okay, I'm a little bit stiff, but then I'm not freaking out thinking, why? Oh, maybe I won't come into the gym, I won't train, because I know what's going on. It's just oh yeah, I had poor sleep. The Warriors suck. I'm disappointed, but I know that that will pass, because I will do some of these things, and I'll make sure that maybe tonight I'm going to go to bed a bit earlier and then try to recover as the week goes on. But then it comes back down to food as well. So if we're consuming things, alcohol, sugars, or just things that don't really agree with us, that's going to create inflammation throughout our body, puffiness, water retention. Our lymphatic system won't flush as well, and we get stagnant lymph. So you may see some of our clients on the floor doing a bit of this, doing a bit of this, doing a bit of this. You know, what are they doing? A lot of that is encouraging lymph to start moving, because if lymph is stagnant, then the surrounding muscles and joints won't move as well. The lymphatic system, it helps flush our toxins, and if those lymphs are stagnant, or it's not moving well, circulation as well will be inhibited. This all comes down to self-management. It's tools like we have self-management for other things in our lives, but to manage ourselves, our system, to offload stress, those are things that I think are vital, that everyone should really have. And whatever way that looks for you to be able to calm your system, some people it's meditation, some people it's listening to music, going for walks, whatever it is. But all those things are great, but then incorporating these things, which are the two big things of what our human body needs: breathing mechanics, or breathing, and our gait, which those two things will help calm our system the most, and things that we enjoy.